an FBI.
Good evening. This is the May 6th monthly meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. It is now called to order. My name is Mimi Love, the chair of the commission, and I'd like to thank the commissioners for donating their time, sharing their valuable insights, and shaping the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all of its citizens. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that the meeting is being recorded. Please note that an audio recording of this meeting will be made available to the public. And so with that, I think we'll start with roll call. Commissioners, just please say present as I call your name. Linda Easley.
Present.
Jonathan Evans, I think he's not attending, but I hope he is. Okay. Diana Fernandez.
Present.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Present.
David Haseen.
Present.
Mick-Young Kim.
Present.
Kathy Kotorides, I haven't seen her. Maybe she'll be joining us a little bit later. Commissioner Lubenow, don't believe is with us. David Manfredi.
Present.
Catherine Morris. Catherine Morris is not with us this evening. Maybe she will be attending later. Bill Ron.
Present.
Laura Solano.
Present.
Kirk Sykes.
Present.
And myself, Mimi Love. All right. Thank you, commissioners, for attending. Next up is approving the meeting minutes. We have the March 4th full commission meeting minutes to approve, as well as the April 1st full commission meeting, and then April 15th subcommittee meetings A and B, and April 22nd subcommittee meetings A and B. Those have been distributed, and do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Great. So commissioners, I have to call on all of you. Linda Easley.
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Yes.
David Haseen.
Yes.
Mick-Young Kim.
Yes.
David Manfredi.
Yes.
Bill Ron.
Yes.
Laura Solano.
Yes.
Kirk Sykes.
Yes.
Myself. Any other commissioners that have joined us? I'm going to move my screen so I can see that. And myself, Mimi Love. So the meeting minutes have been approved. We are going to have informational presentation on the Article 80 modernization by Christina Rico. As you remember, in March, she presented the draft recommendations for BCDC changes. And today we're going to hear more about those details, and we're going to also hear an outline of how these changes will be rolling out in a proposed schedule. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it off to Christina.
Mimi, I am recused. This is Commissioner Solano, but I will be back for the vote.
So Laura, if you want to stay on, we're really not doing a project right now. Christina is going to talk about some changes to the BCDC. After that, if you're recused for, we still have some business to do before we start the projects, but
go for it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Thank you.
And I believe Commissioner Morris has joined us, by the way.
Yes.
Great.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. So very quickly, I know we have a long agenda this evening. Just wanted to give everyone a quick update on continued effort related to Article 80 modernization and BCDC reform. You might remember that I came to you with Nipur Manani and Kevin and Diana and other members of the planning department to share with you some information about Article 80 modernization writ large and some data analysis of the past 5 years of the Commission's work. Then in March, we came to you with with another presentation that focused primarily on the challenges and opportunities as we saw it, and shared 6 specific recommendations with the Commission focused on BCDC operations. We're here tonight to share some more detail about each of these recommendations and a schedule for implementation of these recommendations going forward. And just as a quick refresher, these recommendations here are in blue. This is what we talked about back in March. We talked about initiating the Commission's review earlier, improving the consistency of the reviewers throughout the review process, introducing meeting limits to the Commission's review duration, reforming the way that the Commission takes in public testimony, changing to whom the Commission issues their recommendation, and increasing the threshold of the Commission's review. And I just want to thank everyone here for their very thoughtful comments and feedbacks along the way. Some of these have been sort of tweaked as we've been working on them. These remain the sort of core recommendations, but just want to say that we also added a new recommendation since March, and that was that we are working diligently to create submission templates for proponents to improve the quality and consistency of the content that is shown to the Commission. So I'm going to run through each of these and tell you what's new about them and what you can expect for their rollout. So for the first 2, these are what we consider low fruit, high consensus, easily implementable. That is creating submission templates and initiating the Commission's review earlier. We are working to draft these submission templates right now, and we will be circulating them to the commissioners for comment. Our plan right now is to send them to proponents who are preparing for the July monthly meeting. So the first time you might see the templates in action would be sort of midsummer. We are also initiating the Commission's review earlier. That plan has already started. Projects like 251 Causeway, projects like you'll see tonight, Longwood Place introduction. These are happening as close to when the proponent filed their PNF as possible, having also had a public meeting to allow for a simultaneous planning department and BCDC review. Early results of this action seem promising. So we look forward to taking in more feedback from you all about how this is going over the summer. For further testing this summer is improving the consistency of reviewers assigned to review the project. I think we talked at length about a model that we are calling a cohort model. That's commissioners being assigned to subcommittee A or subcommittee B. Projects are then assigned to that subcommittee and live in that subcommittee for the duration of their review. And introducing meeting limits, which we have more detail about. We are hoping to schedule a training session this June. It's a non-deliberative session. We won't be voting or reviewing projects. This would be a chance for us to meet and discuss procedures for issuing recommendations, operationalizing the cohort model, re-upping all of our training on conflict of interest. This is just good practice. We should all do that on a kind of biannual basis. And reviewing draft bylaws, which I am working to draft with our council right now. So that's what the focus of the June training session will be. We are also hoping to test this summer the function of a meeting limit, which we have more information to share with you this evening about. So I think the last time we talked about introducing meeting limits, we really talked about 2 tiers, one being a 3-meeting sequence, that's an intro, a subcommittee, and a final, and a 5-meeting sequence, that's an intro, 3 subcommittee meetings, and a final. We found that it was important to make a distinction for projects that what we were previously calling ADB. We found that there was a wide variety in scale for projects seeking ADB entitlement. A typical ADB is 1 to 2 buildings, but sometimes there are more than 2 buildings in a single ADB entitlement. That's projects like 776 Summer, or projects like you'll see this evening. That's the Longwood Place Phase 1, which are entertaining 3 or even 4 buildings. We are recommending that the 3 meeting maximum apply to ADB entitlements with 1 up to 2 buildings, and that a 5-meeting maximum would be applied to more complex projects. That's ADB entitlements with 3 or more buildings, PDA master plans, and institutional master plans. And then we retain this kind of custom roadmap option for the white whales, Suffolk Downs, Gillette, Dorchester Bay City, which though we say they're infrequent, I think we're seeing 1 to 2 of these a year. So that is the additional information on meeting limits. These maximums, I think this was a point of discussion at our last meeting, what to do in the case that we've had 3 meetings and the proponent was completely unresponsive or essentially chooses to try to wait out the clock. We will retain the ability to exceed the meeting maximum at the discretion of the chief of planning, which would be Kairos, or the deputy chief of urban design, that would be Diana, during the BCDC review process for what we're characterizing as non-performance, meaning the proponent is completely unresponsive to the feedback that they've received. But we expect this to be a rare and outlier case, not used as the kind of option, the regular option to make the process longer. In this category, so these previous 2 recommendations that we're testing this summer, improving the consistency of reviewers and introducing meeting limits, added to that category is reforming public testimony. All 3 of these recommendations are going to be encoded in bylaws, and we expect to draft those bylaws now, review that draft with you all in June, make amendments based on feedback that we receive in July, and then hopefully adopt those bylaws in August. So more to come on this soon. We don't expect to test reforming public testimony. We thought long and hard about this. There just seemed no clear way to trial it without making it very confusing to the public about how and when to testify. So our game plan is to, effective in August, live testimony will be restricted to when a project is first introduced to the commission. We will always take in written feedback on a rolling basis, which we will be consolidating with written feedback, submitting to the planning department at large. There will just be a very clear comms strategy so that the public understands that this is going to be the new paradigm starting in August. The changes that are not part of the bylaws that are encoded in zoning, that's the last 2, reaffirming the commission's advisory role and increasing the threshold for review. We owed you an update on primarily the threshold. So we talked a lot about the fact that the commission has 2 triggers or thresholds. One is compulsory, that's the size trigger, increasing from 100,000 to 200,000. So here you're seeing that text change made in the zoning. The other trigger is a discretionary trigger. That's when a project is determined to be of special significance. And we owe you language about what a project of special significance means. And here's what we came up with. This is currently drafted for public comment. But we tried to simplify the language of what makes a project of special significance and also in some ways expand it a little bit. So projects can be special for 3 reasons. They could be located on a special site, meaning that they're in a visually prominent or significant open space area or public right-of-way, or the site itself is very large, larger than an acre. The project could be of significant form, meaning it establishes a visual landmark or gateway or bridges dramatically different spatial scales. Or the project could be of significant program, meaning it could be a museum or gallery, a theater, a performing arts center, a religious or spiritual site, a library, archive, community, and or a cultural center. That new text is part of a zoning amendment that is now live on the planning department website for public comment. So we will be taking in, this is part of a comprehensive package of zoning reforms to Article 80 that was all released together earlier this week. It's quite dry. If anybody would like to schedule a page turn, I would be happy to do that with you. It's hundreds of pages of text. But we tried to, in addition to greenlining when we added text or redlining where text is removed, we annotated in the sort of margin what the purpose of the change was. So hopefully it can be a self-directed tour if reading zoning text is your bag. And just a quick putting all of this stuff onto a timeline for you all. So we're here in May. What we're doing this month, we're drafting bylaws and we are publishing draft zoning language for public comment. So check and check. In June, you can expect to review those draft bylaws and we will be working with you all to schedule that training session that I described earlier. In July, the planning department will be working to amend the bylaws based on your feedback and issue, a lot of communications related to our change in the way we're about to take in public comment. We really don't want anybody to be surprised when that happens. And then in August, we'll be adopting those bylaws at the same time that we hope that the zoning amendment will be adopted by the zoning commission. So all of this is timed to kind of happen coincidentally. And then by September, all of our reforms will be fully operationalized. I tried to keep that under 10 minutes. I hope I did. I'm happy to take questions. Also happy to kick that to the end of the meeting this evening if we're tight to time here. Diana, anything I may have missed? I know I just...
You did a fantastic job, and I think I just want to make sure the commissioners know the incredible amount of work that Christina and Seth and Lizzie and the rest of the team have put into these reforms, taking in the feedback from all of you as commissioners, feedback we received from the public through the Article 80 modernization action plan, and the fact that we're really excited to bring these reforms forward to modernize this commission and to hopefully bring things that make your jobs easier and help us execute design excellence across our city.
Well done.
So
Yeah,
commissioners,
No.
Kirk?
No, I was just going to add, as I have in the past, being on the commission and hopefully being a voice for all of you, that I think, one, I agree with what Diana said, a tremendous amount of great work. But I also think there are lots of ways that we'll be able to input into the type of content that would make it easier for us to review the projects. And I've been a real champion for making sure the commission is very comfortable with the templates that reflect the kinds of things that will make us more helpful in responding to proponents and in streamlining process. So excited to see the progress specifically in that area, and then our review of that of those templates so we can input further. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. I would say, commissioners, we're going to have opportunities to talk about these, updates to the BCDC and how we operate. If we could table any questions, unless there's some immediate ones that you want to ask of Christina, to the end of this meeting or a training session, given our long agenda, I think that would be probably the collective group's preference, but any immediate questions that Christina could answer while we're here? All right, well, with that, I'm going to assume there's some silence is acceptance. And so if we can, Christina, I'm going to actually hand it back to you to get a report from the Planning Department Review Committee to review new projects.
Per the regulation of Article 28 of the Boston Zoning Code, Planning Department staff have prepared the following recommendations for your consideration. A proposed project at 305 Longwood Place, Longwood Medical Area, seeking Article 80B entitlement, contemplates the development of Phase 1 of the Longwood Place PDA, PDA, including 1,043,000 square feet of mixed uses and 520 garage parking spaces in 3 buildings on a portion of a 5.9 acre site in accordance with PDA 134, also known as the Longwood Place Development Plan. The proponent filed a PNF on March 18, 2025. Planning Department staff hosted a public meeting on April 30th, 2025. Planning Department staff recommend that the commission vote to review the proposed project.
Commissioners, do we have a motion to review this project?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Great. I'm going to call on all of you, and if you're recused, just let me know. Linda Easley,
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith,
Yes.
David Hassim,
Yes.
Mick Young Kim,
Recused.
thank you. Kathy Koderitis,
Yes.
David Manfredi,
Recused.
thank you. Catherine Morris, I know you were in transit. Are you with us?
I'm still here. Yes, I'm getting ready to park. Yes.
All right, thank you. Bill Ron,
Here, yes.
Laura Solano,
Recused.
thank you. Kirk Sykes,
Yes.
and myself, Mimi Love. Great. We will review an introductory presentation later this evening. I think with that, we're going to move on to presentations for review and public testimony, starting with One Joslin Place. And so just as a reminder, we're Commissioners Gillis-Smith, Ron Sykes, and myself were at the last subcommittee, but at previous committees in this model of a new cohort, Commissioners Manfredi and Lubenow were also in attendance. So we'd like to hear your comments after the presentation first. But with that, I will hand it off to the PD staff to talk about, no, this is just going to presentation. Correct?
That is correct. It's going to the proponent. So if Michael and team, if all of you have now been elevated, are you able to unmute yourself and share your screen? Lizzie, have you seen members of
Good
the...
evening.
Oh, there's Michael. Excellent. Michael, are there other folks that need to be elevated that have not yet been?
Yes, I believe Kevin Sullivan should also be elevated, and I will share my screen as soon as you bring yours down, Christina.
Great. Lizzie, okay, go ahead. All right, Michael, we'll start the timer when you guys are ready.
I'm here, Michael.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the commissioners and for your time, and to BPDA staff for your assistance in preparing this evening's presentation. And thank you as well for the many meetings and feedback that we've received through subcommittee over the past several months for this important project for the city. We're speaking of the new Future Cancer Hospital at One Joslin Place for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute that is developed in collaboration with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. As you may recall from our previous meetings and presentations to you, we're at the current location or the future location at One Joslin Place. And let me now jump directly into the improvements in the urban realm. We'll be sharing with you tonight developments on the site plan, adjacent parcels, and overall urban realm. Kevin will take you through updates of the building itself, and then I'll close with updates on the connectors and some of the ancillary work. So one of the key developments through the subcommittee in the urban realm has really been the opportunity to transform and rethink Joslin Park. In the image on the left is where we concluded the process at the IMP, and recent developments with the image on the right show the opportunity to reorient and realign Joslin Place for a better intersection and vehicular flow, but moreover, for the opportunity to rethink Joslin Park and its benefit to the district, to the region, and to the community through a series of augmented public spaces. I'll remind the commissioners that Joslin Park is a City of Boston park that will be developed through a separate design process led by the Parks and Recreation Department. And some of these changes that I'll describe to you will require legislative review. Moreover, when I start at the circulation level, you'll see in the plan on the left to the right, the new plan for the reorientation of Joslin Place really works to create a clear hierarchy of public spaces, as well as to streamline circulation for patients and visitors, and hopefully to alleviate congestion in the district. The park on the left where we were is reminiscent of many of the squares and parks within the city of Boston, the old Joslin Park. The new allows us to really think of a sequence of spaces that, again, combine in a single intersection that's intuitive as opposed to the two we had before, a logical circulation for visitors and patients to the future cancer hospital, as well as the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center emergency room, one of the busiest in the city, that's located at the south of the page at the Rosenberg building. This project will eventually result in an increase in the parklands through the reorientation of the streets and roads, and as I said earlier, additional legislative review. This concept plan that was developed really shows now a sequence of tiered public spaces from a plaza abutting Brookline Avenue through a series of intuitive desire lines that link a series of rooms or spaces that flow now seamlessly from Brookline Avenue through the park up to Pilgrim Road. Fully accessible and anticipating future desire lines, we believe that it starts to now address really a building face to building face design methodology. So that with key spaces in the future cancer hospital, in the lobby and lobby garden, that are now able to work contiguously for a landscape that provides much more continuity and again, a streamlined circulation process. We think that this is a real true improvement to the urban realm and provides lots of opportunities for Michael Van Valkenburg, our landscape architects, to really create a series of spaces with the Parks Department that respond to community needs, to more intimacy, to more climate resilient design, as well as a series of implementations to the public realm. With that, I'd like to transfer to Kevin to talk about some of the really great developments that have happened with the building itself.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. So on the building design, we've been working on a lot of the facade detailing as well as some work around the urban realm at the base of the building. The building's still very much based around the fundamental ideas of softness and warmth. These two drawings really illustrate the petals wrap the facade on Pilgrim, Brookline, and Joslin Place with a simpler facade of metal panel rain screen and curtain wall up against Longwood Center. As we look at the building, it's still very much defined by these very soft petals with this high performance glass curtain wall system and these articulated fins on its surface that give it some additional detail. And we're going to go through some of the details of the facade right now. So there's certainly the petals, the trim, really the idea of the surface of the petal being almost like a lace curtain, which is a frit rain screen that basically filters light into there. And then even the petal itself, this is an X-ray actually of the rose petal. And there's articulated surfaces that we're looking and studying on that. And this just shows you the detail of the frit pattern that goes from a fairly dense pattern to more transparent where the patients are looking through it. And this is a very sort of rich pattern that's actually going to vary across the facade is between each of the floor levels. I also wanted to show you a couple of the details. The bottom actually is the difference between the frit and a perforated metal rain screen, which is in front of the louvers. And this is a mock-up from today. And then the surface of the glass is going to have these curved fins along the surface to give it scale. And this is bringing a new level of detail to the facade that's going to give another level of detail, almost like a second look. So as you walk around the building, you'll notice that it changed quite a bit at night. And this radiance from inside occurs along the stem, where there's some articulated lighting at the base where the canopy meets it. And on the inside of the building, there are these shells, this family nest along the perimeter of the building that radiates this wood warmth to the exterior. So it's at nighttime, it's going to have another layer of depth and meaning. Now, the base of the building is very much defined by the sculptural nature of the stem and the shells, how they come together. This happens to be at the main entrance. We had a lot of fun with models. And then as you look at the lobby, and this is from that new green space Michael was just describing, you look into the lobby and you'll notice on the interior, there's this wonderful garden on the interior. The next slide is going to actually take away some of the trees so that you can see that. And even the stem from the exterior is migrating into the interior lobby space. So you can see that on the interior. So it's going to be quite dynamic. The landscape on the interior sort of slopes from the level of the lobby all the way to Brookline Avenue, and you get a sense of this gradual slope and the materiality sort of transferring to the streetscape as well as along Joslin. This is a view of the streetscape along Brookline. We've refined the storefronts, bringing the terracotta that was at the gap, the gasket between Longwood Center and our building across the storefront, and this wonderful sort of bronze metal materiality that defines the stem. This is just another view, and it's giving you a sense also of the window onto the cafe above this modest canopy along Brookline. As we move along Joslin Place, there's this terracotta rain screen that brings this warm and rich texture along the streetscape and takes you inside the building. There's a sort of a granite water course that turns into a sign as well. And then there have been some refinements on Pilgrim, where we've actually brought the pedal from Joslin Place all the way around. And this terracotta rain screen actually weaves its way around the base and covers the podium of the building, which the parking garage access for patients and the loading dock are viewed from there. Wanted to give you a sense of this palette. What you're seeing, the rain screen is camouflaging a lot of complexity in terms of different louvers and windows, bringing a filtered quality of light. And then looking back on the building from the other side of Joslin Park, some foreshadowing of this new design that we have for the Pilgrim connector. So Michael, I think you were going to go through the connectors.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So we've also made quite a bit of progress, knowing we only have about a minute left on the connectors. So across Brookline Avenue, the articulation and development, you'll see here we started to sequentially look at the Brookline connector to lighten its profile against the sky, to create varied transparencies, as well as a true sense of connection and individuality to it. We are continuing to study the profile and lighting concepts of the base and the roof of this, working incrementally to ease its transitions at the sky, as well as very carefully considering how it meets both buildings at either side and how this gateway really functions both inbound and outbound on Brookline Avenue. Here you can see as well that we're also contemplating how it meets not only the future cancer hospital in the forms of the pedals, but also the new interface at the Dana Mayer building, creating a threshold or a portal at a staff entry there, and carefully articulating the work at the replacement of a facade to receive it structurally. Finally, I'll close with some of the most exciting work, which has been the development of the Pilgrim Road Hospital connector. Again, through the course of subcommittee, we were challenged by both subcommittee as well as BCDC staff to really think of the connector as a third building with a presence on Joslin Park, more of a building and an extension of the landscape itself. So conceptually, we worked to define a portion of the connector to take a seat at the head of that table and hierarchically to separate the two bridges that then link it to the FAR building as well as the future cancer hospital, serving really as a backdrop and extension to the park itself. So here with a new solidity and expansion of the public realm at the base, the Pilgrim Road connector that provides that essential link of patients from the cancer hospital to the emergency room and operating rooms and other clinical resources becomes a solid piece of architecture that also previews the future development of this site in the long term for Beth Israel. Specifically at the pedestrian realm, working with Michael Van Valkenburg and BHB, the idea that this loggia or covered pedestrian passage that links parking garages with outpatient functions, as you'll see in the lower left, becomes a destination for pedestrians and visitors and guests, a space that really extends the park into Joslin. So with a new wall, veiled gardens, as well as seating niches, create the backdrop extension here. At the upper level, it connects seamlessly with effortless patient patient flow, the floors above, and really takes itself as a piece of architecture. There is a similar language for the connector that bridges across Pilgrim Road that's almost a sibling to the Brookline Avenue connector. And with that, we again thank everyone for your time and input and the valuable challenges that you gave to the team to really advance and refine the building and its various pieces of the urban realm. And with that, that finishes our presentation, Christina.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, as you're collecting your thoughts, I'm going to invite Seth Reisman to talk about the park process. It's an unusual process that they imagine, and while Michael described it, I think a little bit more explanation from Seth might be helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Love. And just a quick note from the Planning Department that we would like to acknowledge that the alteration of the Joslin Park parcel lines to accommodate the vision set forth today will require approval by the City of Boston Parks Commission, the City Council, the Mayor, and ultimately a 2/3 vote of both houses of the state legislature in accordance with Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution. If approved, the resultant reconfiguration of surrounding public rights-of-ways will require approval by the Public Improvement Commission. The design of the park itself will require a dedicated public process led by the Parks Department, which will then require approval from the Parks Commission. City Department staff have vetted this vision for initial feasibility and support changes that increase the quantity and quality of available park space while improving the safety and accessibility of circulation in the area, particularly for pedestrians. The Planning Department thanks the Commission for the bold charge to consider the opportunity of building face to building face redesign of this space issued during its review of the BIDMC DFCI IMP application. I'd like to thank the proponent for their ambition in taking up the charge, and lots more process on this one to come.
Thank you, Seth. So commissioners, we are open to comments. Maybe we'll start with an overall view, but feel free to direct slides. I see Commissioner Ron, your hand up. I think you're muted, Bill. We're not hearing you.
I'm happy to lead off, having been, like most of the committee members, at all 6 of the meetings. And I'm just going to be very brief. I think it's Michael and Kevin and the team has done a wonderful job of giving us an exciting building. The lower level is very welcoming to patients and visitors alike. The bridges, plural, feel very integrated with the buildings, and the facade of petals and stems is beautiful architecturally. It's restrained, it's inventive. I think it's in the details of the curtain wall are spectacular. So I just, as one who's been in this whole thing all along, I strongly endorse approval.
Thank you, Bill. Shauna?
Thank you very much for the presentation, Kevin and Michael. And I have been through the whole project, and really I will talk primarily about the open space, but I do also want to add my admiration for Bill also took one of my words. I was going to use elegance, restraint, and voluptuousness of the building. It's each time we've seen it, it has become richer and quieter, but also more exciting. Very, very happy to see you take up Mimi's suggestion of wrapping the pedal along Pilgrim. It doesn't look like the poor sister anymore. So it's a beautiful, beautiful building. I think in terms, could we maybe go to the plan of the open space? And yeah, this any of them is fine. I think that it's a very I think you worked I know quite in depth with the planning department staff on this as well, to increase the space, to decrease the amount of parking around the building, around the park. And I think that the grading is actually very smart in that by bringing up the one piece on the corner, the thickened piece on the corner, you've resolved one of the large grading differences between the cancer hospital and the outside. So I think the overall plan of this is quite rich and a really, really nice solution. I know this is going to be going through more of a process, but I'll just mention the advice or suggestion that a couple of us brought up to investigate the porosity and potentially the uniformity of it. It's a little bit more during that process, but it feels a little bit enclosed. And I understand the oasis aspect of it, but having opportunities to feel like you're engaging with the outside as well as being able to engage with the park from being outside. But still, I think you'll go through a robust process on this, and the big moves I think are very smart and are giving more space to the pedestrian rather than the vehicular space. Maybe we should go to the Pilgrim Road connector. And well, I know that the last time we saw this, a number of us had mentioned that the ginkgos, the fastigic ginkgos on the outside weren't necessarily helping helping the connector. I think that the building aspect of it is quite elegant. I think the idea of incorporating it as part of the park is good, but I still do have concerns about the overtaking of the air rights over the sidewalk for the circulation of the building, of the buildings, and would encourage planning department staff to continue to investigate the possibility with you of this becoming being a temporary circulation strategy until the Deaconess building is redeveloped, which we understand isn't in the short next 5 to 10 years, but it's anticipated will likely be coming down the road. But in general, it's been a real pleasure working on this project. Working with all of you and seeing you take up our suggestions and your own and make the project richer with every step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. David Manfredi.
Thanks, Mimi. I'm going to echo what we heard from Bill and from Shauna. This is a wonderful project, a great addition to Longwood. I think it will be an important piece of architecture in the city. I have only one question, and Shauna mentioned it. And it's this page we're looking at right now, this set of drawings. I love the idea or the narrative of the third wall, the extension of the park space as the end wall. You've done such a marvelous job with a big building, making it feel as delicate and elegant. Others have used that word as you have, and I love, as I say, I like the narrative. I find the expression really not. I guess you set the standard so high on the building. Doesn't feel nearly as feels heavy. Doesn't feel nearly as elegant. And I understand that this may be a shorter term solution, and I'm not looking for a wildly expensive solution here. But I look at the perspective on the lower left, and I wonder about the sense of that loggia space. I look at the perspective on the upper left, and wonder if it can't be more refined and a little bit lighter. And maybe the green is even more a part of that story. I certainly I applaud all of your big moves and including the green space, the park space, and I think the building itself. And Shauna mentioned this. Thank you for responding to Mimi's comments about the Pilgrim Road elevation of the building, which I think it completes the form. This is going to be a really nice building.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Kirk Sykes? I think you're on mute, Kirk.
At the risk of being redundant, I think there's appreciation for the work you've done with the mass of the building and the wrapper and all the comments that have been made. I think the challenges, and I think there's some great trade-offs in public realm benefits. I mean, gaining some interior flows into the exterior space that is multi-seasoned is a great treatment. And I think the park development is, with the comments of all of our landscape colleagues, quite excellent. I think some of the challenges reside in 0 to 40 feet on a couple of fronts. And I think we've talked a bit about the Pilgrim Road edge of the park. And I think it's just a question of, there are nice places to be, and that's not yet the nicest place. And I think these are development that can go on in terms of brightening, lightening, and connecting that edge of the park, or I should say of the building under the connector to the park, a little more. I also feel similarly around Brookline Ave at the base of the building. I don't yet feel the building engages either in lightness and brightness and welcoming the public. I know you've got some facades, storefront space there, but it just feels heavy under the lightness of the pedal. And I think similarly, the way the bridge is received on the other side still is not at the level of the way the building is so elegantly done in terms of being more airy. And I know you're still looking at lightening up the bridge, perhaps with some more transparency of the sky, so it feels less impactful as people are driving under it. So I guess in simple terms, I believe the building, the project, the park, already. I think you can work with staff to address what remain the treatments at 0 to 40 feet, and I'm picking a number, but I think they reside on multiple street edges and receiving aspects of the building that can be further enhanced. And I know you have the talent to do it because I can see it in the team. So I just think we need to figure out how to make that layer of the facade and the receiving aspects more elegant. And so I think we can work on that, but otherwise I agree, great project.
Thank you, Kirk. David Hassin?
Thank you, Mimi. I don't have much to add to the commissioner comments. The only thing that I would like to add, wonderful project. I haven't seen this in a long time since the master planning process, and I was very concerned about the park situation. And I think that the solution that the team has developed is really excellent. I'm really excited about the reconfiguration of the ground plane and how this park is being envisioned. What I'm discouraged about is the extraordinary process that you have to go through to change it. And I just wonder, I think I'm going to suggest or offer that when we, if there's anything that we as a commission can do to make a specific statement about our recommendation around that change, for all the hurdles that it has to go through with all the various entities that it has to go through, like a standalone statement about the park itself and our recommendation for that. I would like to do that in order to help the proponent have a pithy little comment from us that is specific to that. And with that, I'll lower my hand.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that idea. I think it's a good one. Linda?
Yeah, I love that idea too, and we have done it on occasion, and it's nice to have solidarity around these bold ideas. I had two comments to add. The first is that I haven't seen this in subcommittee, but Mimi and I have seen this as the project has progressed, and I really love the poetry around the petals. And my only comment is, as you continue to work with staff on this, I hope that the subtlety in the skin isn't lost. It's just beautiful kind of gauzy feel that you have when you admire this building. And I hope that the details that you've been working so hard on can be brought to front a little bit more. For instance, I think that the nighttime image that you shared starts to show that detail at a level that we don't see here in the daylight images. So, and the second is something that Shauna raised, and if we can go to slide, I think slide 37. Right, and so one thought that I had as we're thinking about this, I agree that the columnars seem to be hiding the building more than they are to kind of terminate the view. And I wonder if the team has thought about another approach where you might actually have a green wall at that back of the loggia as a way to terminate the view, but in a softer way, in the way that doesn't feel like it's being hidden. And I wonder if that would help the eye to kind of understand that termination, but also add some interest to the loggia itself, which, as others have said, might feel quite heavy above you as you're walking along. And so I just wanted to pop that suggestion out there as you continue to work with staff and maybe test that idea to see if it's something that feels right for this park. And the third thing to add is I think it's so clever, this parklet that is now kind of part of the tower. And we didn't have that before. The park was really surrounded by roadway, and I think that's going to make a huge difference in terms of how that piece of open space is used. So I just wanted to congratulate you on those ideas. Great project.
Thank you, Linda. I'll just chime in and say that the proponent team has been very responsive. We've had excellent working sessions. I feel that the projects that challenge us the most to think the most are always the most exciting. And I definitely think that this one falls in that category. I will just echo, I think the urban, design move to shift the entry point is so brilliant. And the subtlety around that decision doesn't translate in these renderings. It's a grading solution. It justifies the entry of the building. It really softens that change in grade from the lobby to the landscape in ways that are really subtle. And we worked with the team to, try to ask some hard questions, and they came up with a brilliant design solution. So I thank them for that back and forth. And, I appreciate the pedal. Thank you for considering it. And I hope you like it better. And I'll just leave with, really, I'm repeating what you've already heard from the Pilgrim Road connector. I definitely think the diagram is right, where it stands alone as an elevation and the connectors on the side have a different language rather than one consistent language. It just looks like a tube. So I think the diagram is right, but maybe what I can leave you with is now that the building is in, really good shape, it has that texture, it has that quality that is so, rendering so beautifully. Maybe it's time to think about modeling this Pilgrim Road bridge. And you guys love to build models, and that might be, a good insight into how to deal with it. Because I do think it's right that it terminates the view of the park, but it still is reading heavy-handed. We talked about some other solutions, but I do think given the time that you have to develop and focus on this connector piece with the staff, I think it can really become a little bit more softer, I guess is where I'm going with it. But I do think the diagram is right. So I'm not seeing any other hands. And so maybe, Christina, we can see if there's any public testimony.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so we're going to close the public testimony period. And at the risk of jinxing it, we are 10 minutes ahead of schedule. You just need to vote.
All right, so commissioners, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I would like to make a motion to strongly approve the project with the request that the proponent continue to work with staff on both the character of the connector, the Pilgrim Street connector, and its landscape, as well, on a lesser side on the Brookline Street elevation, but also on the potential temporary nature of that connector.
Second.
Can I add to that motion?
Yes.
I just wanted to add that idea, if the commissioners are okay with it, with issuing a sort of a specific recommendation to all the public agencies that are going to be reviewing the reconfiguration of the ground plan, that of the unanimity of our support for that effort. If it's okay with you, Shawna.
Absolutely, David.
All right, and Bill, I saw that you wanted to chime in.
Well, I was going to say what David just said, but can that be made very explicit? I mean, the sentence could really use the words David used to make it clear that we were unanimous and it was important enough to bring up.
Christina, do you have enough with that? Or do you want to restate, do you want us to try to restate the motion?
Only the second portion. I have captured the recommendation to approve with the proviso that additional design review attention focus on the character of the connector, and that the planning department consider mechanisms for encoding its temporality. And then I was typing, I'm sorry, David, while you were talking about the commission issuing a statement of support for the...
I think the statement would be in recognition of the regulatory hurdles that the regulatory hurdles that the reconfiguration of the ground plane entail. The BCDC would like to make a special recommendation supporting those changes for the benefit of the city's public realm, or something to that effect.
Understood. I think we can follow up. I think the desire to make a formal statement is part of this, and I think I can follow up with the chairs on a statement that maybe we can circulate for everyone.
I'm imagining something that would accompany, that would go to the legislature, for example.
Sure.
Something.
Understood.
Yeah. And I think, just to talk this through, David, I think the deeper thought behind it, if it's not approved for whatever reasons, we would want to see how this would be reconfigured.
Exactly. The building design responds to it and all of that. So it's
not a nice tack on. It's
right.
really
It's
essential.
It's integral. It's integral
Yes.
to the overall concept.
Okay. We're going to call this the Shawna Gillis-Smith motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, so I will call on everyone. Linda Easley,
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith,
Yes.
David Hassin,
Yes.
Mick Young Kim. I know she's recused, but I was making sure she was here or not. Kathy Kotorides,
Yes.
David Manfredi,
Yes.
Catherine Morris,
Yes.
Bill Ron,
Yes.
Laura Solano.
Recused.
Thank you. Kirk Sykes,
Yes.
and myself, Mimi Love. Congratulations. We look forward to seeing this project realized. Good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you to the commissioners and thank you to the BPDA staff for their assistance.
Yeah, congrats to the team. I want to make a quick note here, Mimi, that I think, you know, as Christina was laying out our broader reforms earlier, this is a project that has gone through in the 3 meetings that we are bringing forward as part of our standard. And I think it's an excellent example for those that have watched and followed this process of a team that has been responsive to feedback and was able to go through the BCDC process in a very expeditious way. So kudos to the team, and hopefully a model many other designers going through BCDC follow.
All right. Thank you.
right.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.
All right.
I'm going to pass the agenda on to Linda Easley for the next 2 projects, as I'm recused.
Thank you, Mimi. I think we have a couple of commissioners that are recused from the IMP and also Matthews Arena projects that are part of Northeastern University. So we'll invite you all to mute yourself and take yourselves off camera. And we'll move on with both of those, starting with the Northeastern IMP. And once the proponent has had a chance to present, we'll have the commissioners offer comments. And I'll just remind the group of us, our cohort that have been part of these reviews, so that you can prepare some of your comments first. And that included David Hassin, Kathy Kotorides, Kathy Morris, and Laura Solano. So those of you who have been part of this will give you first dibs on the comments once the proponent completes their presentation. And we've seen a preview of some of these slides, and I would just encourage the proponent. I know that there are a lot of slides. I think we have a kind of 10 minutes for your presentation. So if we can fit it within that period of time, that would be great.
Victoria and team, have you been elevated? Are you able to unmute yourselves?
I believe I can unmute myself. Good evening, everybody. I'm just checking that the team is here. Is Margaret here?
I see Kartiki. Are you able to share your screen?
Kartiki, could you share?
Yeah, 1 second.
Beautiful. All right, well, I'll open up. Good evening, everybody. My name is Victoria Abelina. I'm AVP for Campus Planning and Design. We have worked with you and your colleagues for, I want to say, close to 6 months. And we really feel that we've made a better plan than what we've originally filed. So we are going to share the updates. We're going to share some feedback, and we look forward to the discussion. Next slide, please. All right, so we originally came to the full commission in December, and we were recommended for several subcommittee meetings, which were helpfully organized by topic. So mostly we spoke about open space and landscape. We then proceeded to talk about site rationale and massing. We talked about street views and perspectives, and then we revised those and finally had a meeting in April. Mostly the focus was about on refining connectivity around the sites. We identified several sites for change in urban design as our program needs evolved, in internal conversations as well. But the focus has always been on legibility and connectivity of the site. So you will see progress on those fronts. And if Margaret on our team, from Sasaki consultant team, can be elevated, then she will run us through the presentation. Next slide, please. Margaret, are you able to unmute?
Yes, okay. Thank you for the access. Apologies to be a few minutes late. Thanks, Victoria. Hello, everyone. Margaret Leander, Campus Planning Principal at Sasaki. So to launch in here with the big ideas, to remind everyone, our plan is really grounded in an urban design framework, really driven by these three big ideas. The first one being immersive and experiential learning, really focusing on dynamic mixed-use environments throughout the campus that support academic hubs and diverse campus life experiences. The second one being sustainable and resilient public realm, which really imagines a cohesive, connected public realm across campus, serving as a nexus for the broader natural system. And the third is really campus within the city, which highlights Northeastern's strong connections between academic learning and real world engagement, really with that emphasis on the campus being well integrated with the city, both physically and programmatically. Go to the next slide. So our proposed plan really includes a total of 8 projects. Here we're highlighting really the 3 that we focused on mostly with the subcommittee, 21 Forsyth Street, C number 1, Bursting Rubenstein, and Cullinane and Fertig. You go to the next slide. So of course, the public realm framework really here prioritizing a vibrant pedestrian experience, both internally and at the campus edges, while also ensuring proper service and loading access. Here you can really see the primary pedestrian paths in yellow, and we'll get into some of the big landscape moves as part of the campus communities discussion in a few slides. So before getting into the campus communities and development sites, we really wanted to place these sites in the broader city context, specifically along Huntington. So here you can see Huntington looking south, extending from Mass Ave on the left, all the way to 500 Huntington on the right. Really, our proposed sites are in white outlined, and you can really see sort of how both the massing and the height is really contributing to the broader corridor, aligning with that 60-foot datum, and really complementing recent height precedents set with both the Huntington Theater and 500 Huntington. So happy to come back to this in the Q&A. There's a lot of content here. Just another section, once again, looking at Huntington, but looking north, you see our proposed 21 Forsyth Street, the former White Hall, really how this compares to other buildings along the corridor, as well as the 409, proposed 409 Huntington.
Connected to desktop LCQ2CL6.
Continuing on. Oh, sorry, Kathy, was that a comment? No, okay. Moving on with the campus community, starting with the University Fens. Once again, University Fens really refers to all the areas north of Huntington Ave, and our single development site here really being 21 Forsyth Street, sort of sitting at the crossroads of both Forsyth and Huntington. And really this will remain a residential site despite some changes you'll see on the next few slides. So since the INPNF submittal, we've really significantly reduced the height from 230 feet to 170 feet, really trying to minimize the shadows on the Back Bay Fens. We've matched the datum really to the Merino Center at 60 feet. Previously it was at 80, and really simplified the massing, all while keeping the same sort of target of 1,050 beds that we'd previously proposed. So just a few diagrams to explain the site a bit more. You'll see we'll have retail and dining use on the first 2 floors, residential above. You can see some of the ground floor thinking as well in sort of the middle diagram there. You see the welcome mat at the building entrance, really facing the corner and mirroring the space across Forsyth in front of the Merino Center. And we should also note here that what we're finally proposing differs slightly from the Avenue of the Arts guidelines in terms of tower setback and street wall dimensions, as we are aiming really to achieve the optimal footprint for housing within the limitations of the site. Next. So previously, if you jump back, Kartiki, it's an existing view of Huntington, looking at 21 Forsyth on the right, the law school on the left. And if you jump to the proposed view, you can go to get a sense of 21 Forsyth's massing, the welcoming entrance, the 60-foot street wall aligning with Merino, and really that tower setback to break the tall facade.
Margaret, you have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, well then quickly, in terms of West Village here, we'll go quickly to, but previously I think the major changes here were really changing from an academic site once again to a housing site. We are proposing 910 beds, but essentially working with the subcommittee, we have gone from a tower with a lower podium really to a more mid-rise building that respects the street wall of 60 feet. Really simplified this massing more appropriately for an IMP. We'll sort of skip to the next slide, Kartiki, if that's all right. Really just trying to understand once again the ground floor access, how the site is relating to Huntington and Parker Street, that 60-foot datum as well. And we have a few more views in the next slide too. If you just flip to those, Kartiki. An existing one of Punter's Pub, Burstein Rubenstein, Parker and Forsyth here. You flip to the proposed, you really sort of get a sense of what we're proposing here with this new residential site, how it relates to the corridors, but as well as existing sort of West Village to the left, 500 Huntington to the right. If you go ahead, next slide, just another view, once again, of Burstein Rubenstein existing and proposed. So sort of getting a sense of how that lays out along the corridor. Next slide. I guess moving into Forsyth Square, the real site here we're honing in on is Cabot. Once again, I think the uses remain the same as academic in terms of research, but really looking at how we drastically reduce the height from 250 to 200 feet. And once again, sort of adjusting the datum, match the surrounding 60 feet, overall simplifying the massing really to reflect more of a zoning envelope. You can keep going, Kartiki. Once again, sort of rough distribution of use in the first diagram, understanding the ground floor in the second, really that welcoming plaza at the corner of Forsyth and Huntington there, connecting with the Back Bay Fens and the Southwest Corridor. Yes, I think we can continue on to get to the view of here. So existing Cabot as it is today. And if you flip to the next slide, sort of get a sense of what that sort of welcome pad, what that sort of entry is, what that open space and plaza really is, the significant gateway for Northeastern, but really sort of drawing people in with the view towards the open space, the Cabot Quad. You go to the next slide. I think just have a few more views of Forsyth Street, really looking towards Ruggles in the back. You have a Forsyth site on the left, UR Complex on the right. Here you get a sense of the proposed public realm improvements, especially in terms of widening sidewalks, adding more street furniture and outdoor seating as well. So you can flip. The next one is just once again another alternative view, looking the other way with Ruggles to your back. You can flip to the proposed. Yes, and sort of once again, just getting a sense of the massing, 21 Forsyth Street in the back, but of course the public realm improvements here to the important corridor of Forsyth Street. If you keep going, we can move into the East End. This is sort of the last district we wanted to highlight. Really, once again, a primarily research campus light hub with some academic space. Getting into Hertig Cullinane, I think really this is the site that changed the most. As you'll see, we have changed from previously Mugar and Cullinane on the left to Hertig and Cullinane as the development site here, really related to reasons related to project sequencing and phasing. And you can also see that this site really involves a reimagining of the Robinson Quad, really trying to elevate this space given how primary of a pedestrian path it is. You go to the next slide, we get into Gainsborough. I think some of the major refinements here since the IMPNF, really greater setbacks to create more of a legible gateway plaza, better relation to 262 St Botolph Street, public realm, and then really adjusting to the new site that is Hertig and Cullinane. Next slide, just briefly look at sort of the public realm and connectivity strategy behind this district, focusing on sort of the primary pedestrian paths, east-west, really trying to think about what should be pedestrian versus what should be shared, and what should remain primarily service access. You go to the next slide, we just have a few more left. really unpacking these sites a bit more. The uses of both Gainsborough and Hertig and Cullinane, once again, have remained the same. We have Hertig Cullinane at about 200 feet, Gainsborough stepping down to about 150 feet. And really, in terms of the ground floor, trying to prioritize public facing and social spaces along St Botolph or the Robinson Quad. And if you go to our final two slides here, just looking at the views, once again, this is sort of a looking at on St Botolph Street with Gainsborough in the center with the arena site to the left. You flip to the proposed condition moving down St Botolph Street from 262 St Botolph to Gainsborough to Hertig Cullinane in the background. Really here seeing sort of the intent behind this district to sort of pull people into campus from this eastward gateway from Mass Ave, really with the transparent facades. And really the intent of having this be one sort of continuous urban corridor with relating datums and really treatment of the public realm. So that was our last slide, hopefully within the 3 minutes, Christina. Victoria, Corey, anything else to add?
No, we're just here to answer questions, if any.
Well, thanks, Victoria, and thanks, Margaret, for the presentation, and to your team. I think as Kathy and Catherine and Laura and David get ready to start us off with comments, I just wanted to add that this team has been incredibly responsive to the sessions that we've had, and I'll just add my thanks for that. And I think we've ended up with hopefully a deeper and better projects as we've gone along. So, and it's a lot of moving parts here with those 7 or 8 projects. And so we appreciate the clarity that you kind of presented tonight, and also through all the sessions that we've had before. I'll just add, for those commissioners who haven't been part of this Northeastern IMP, we had our first ever kind of horticulture presentation as part of these sessions, and it was really lovely to see how Northeastern is thinking at that scale in such an urban campus. So commissioners, if you have a comment, feel free to raise your digital hand and I'd be happy to call on you. David.
Thank you. Again, I want to echo Linda's comments. Working with this team on this very, very complex set of issues has been a real pleasure, just in terms of the way the information, the thinking behind it, the information and how it was organized, the sessions that we had. For the benefit of bringing other commissioners up to speed, I'll focus on what I think some of the highlights of the architectural evolution have been. I really appreciate the fact that in rethinking so many of these sites for reasons of height or use or configuration, in this very highly complex campus that has a real heterogeneous grouping of buildings, that in the final guidelines, I feel like there has been a real strong commitment to the first 60 feet of all the buildings, whether that be on Huntington Avenue or within the campus or approaching down.
David, I think we lost your audio there. No, can't hear you. Doesn't look like you're muted, and we can see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. All right, thanks. We'll come back to you. Kathy, Catherine, or Laura, any comments? Laura?
I agree with David and Linda that this has been quite responsive, and you've done something that is so difficult on campuses, which is that you've allowed the buildings to kind of shift and move to not only, I think, make it better on Huntington Avenue, but also throughout the campus. You've got the difficult task of having to have a campus, true campus on all sides of the buildings. And if I have one criticism, and I've had it before, it's about the service areas. And can you go to that photograph that you had that shows an existing, I think an existing one? Yeah. So I don't feel like the service is resolved, but this isn't the place to really talk about that, except in this way. Well, I appreciate the photograph that's shown for the existing plaza. I think you can do better. And as you're going further into the project, as you start to look at other areas, you might try to find some precedents for improving that, because these, while, you know, perfectly walkable, et cetera, I still think that character-wise, they take away from the rest of the moves that you're trying to do. So I'll just leave you with that. And again, it's just something to continue to be studied. But this is just a really terrific plan. And you have made so many changes based upon comments, but also your own sensibilities. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Laura. And just to piggyback on that, for commissioners that haven't been part of these subcommittee, there's a kind of a crescent shape that begins kind of on the left-hand side of the campus, kind of on the western side at Huntington, and then arcs through and goes all the way to St. Botolph. And I think that we were enjoying that as a commission. And one of the spaces that's right at the heart of that, just to the west of Dana, is a service area. And so I think we continue to really want the university to think about that in a different way.
Linda, can you hear me now?
Yes, I saw that your hand went down and you disappeared, but yes, David.
Okay, I'm trying everything. I just wanted to, if I wasn't able to make this point before, I just want to compliment the team on their attention to the way that all the new buildings hit the ground and engage with the first few floors of the building, both on Huntington Avenue, coming down St Botolph Street, and throughout. I think that was one of the real successes of the process going forward, was just really thinking about how these datums along Huntington Avenue can be strengthened on both sides, and how, as you come into a campus that has many low-rise buildings, that these new structures weave as well as they possibly can into that existing, into the existing character of the campus. And I feel like on the architecture side, that was one of the things that we focused on, and that I really feel shows through in the evolution of the three clusters of buildings.
Thanks, David. I'm glad we got your voice back. Kirk.
So I'm going to defer to the commissioners who have been through the whole process of reviewing this, but I do have a question that piggybacks on David's comment about the way the buildings meet the ground. And I guess from my perspective, I wonder what guidance there is or protocol or rules for porosity and transparency. And I don't know how that gets integrated into an IMP, but I'm curious if it can, because I think whether it's 10 feet taller or 10 feet shorter, it's maybe less impactful to how accessible the building is to the public realm that's on the other side of the wrapper. So I don't know who that question's for, but feel free to take it.
We didn't talk specifically about that in subcommittee, Kirk, but I really like this idea, and I think it actually ties into the university thinking about these welcome mats. And the slides, you know, went quickly, but you might have noticed that some of them had these welcome mats, and the idea is that you create this welcoming place that feels inviting and magnetic. And I love the idea that there would be this porosity and transparency that that would occur on the portions of the building, especially that are sponsoring those welcome mats. And I see both.
I do think that if you go to the slide of coming down from St Botolph Street into the site, which was that third grouping of buildings, and I completely support this comment, but no, the view actually, if you don't mind, the
42. I think it's 42.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. I think that the guideline slides imply what you're talking about. You can see a sense of transparency, for example, in these views, that these elements that are at the streetscape are suggested to be more transparent. But being more explicit about that as a system or as a strategy across the entire campus, I think, is a great suggestion and something that could or should be incorporated into the recommendation.
Well, I think I agree, and I think that what I'm really getting at is that if you were to pull your perimeter back internal to the building, at least the way your cores were organized, if that were one of the organizing principles, even if you couldn't get in to a portion of the building or an aspect, you would be able to see into the building, or you would be able to see across some of the green spaces into the building. And so I like the welcome mat idea, but I guess I'm being a little more aggressive. I'd like to know if I'm trading height or, volume massing, that I'm getting back a really visually accessible experience around many of these buildings, which I think could open up the whole campus with a dense campus like this. So I don't want to beat this to death. I think staff gets the idea, but that was kind of so I agree with you. I hope, David, that the intimation of the diagram is the aspiration, but I'm looking for a way to memorialize it in some guidance that then fits our trade-offs in many regards. So that's it.
I really like this comment, Kirk, because some of these proposed buildings are along, very public areas and major streets in Boston, and so there's a great power in creating this transparency. Seth, I didn't know if you wanted to respond directly to this comment or if you were raising your hand for something else.
Sure. I was going to offer some thoughts in response to Kirk's ask, which I think is a couple layers. One is to describe the conversations we've had in the process with Northeastern during this has been very much about how do we, densify, this urban campus? How do we accommodate the additional density with grace? And part of that is the exterior open space, and part of that has certainly been a discussion about the interior publicly accessible space with these lobbies. And there's been a lot of focus on the programming, how to make sure that that's active. As recently as the other day, we were talking to them about the function that cafes have and actually bringing people into these lobbies, particularly the one we see here at Hertig Cullinane, to make it a viable, connector against that desire line. So that's certainly been part of the conversation. And in terms of how we're looking to, I think, enshrine that's something that we can work into the language of the IMP. It is embedded to a degree in the Avenue of the Arts guidelines that some of these buildings front on with Huntington. And then certainly as each of these buildings come back for ADB approval, that is something that we can, foreground as well.
Thanks, Seth. Shauna?
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. Could we go to the overall plan? So I wasn't on any of the subcommittee meetings. So my comments should not influence the approval or not approval. One of the things I think that's exciting about the project and it is very different than a typical campus, is the main spatial moves of the open space. You had described, Linda, you said a crescent, or there are often a diagonal movement along a campus, which is a little bit counterintuitive to way people understand things sort of spatially and haptically. In a typical campus, you're moving the same direction as the building orientation, or you have the benefit of desire lines across a big lawn. So, and I know in looking at the diagram, it looks like it's a paving change, but I think going forward, and maybe this has been discussed, thinking about how the landscape can spatially create these major circulation directions, particularly if they're counter to the building orientation or diagonal to the building orientation, in a way that one doesn't have to think about it. So I'm really thinking about sort of haptic wayfinding and how the landscape can support that. Also, given the incredible legacy of the trees and the landscape on the Northeastern campus. We're working with that together. So that's something that I think is quite interesting about thinking how this campus will develop with this overall master plan strategy.
Thank you, Shauna. Kathy?
Great, thank you. I will echo everything that my fellow commissioners, especially those who have participated in the entire process, have said, both about the team's responsiveness and the quality of the work put forward. I think recognizing just how dense this campus actually is, there is so much to applaud here. And I really do look forward to how all of this evolves. And it feels as though the buildings put forward, or the forms put forward, are reasonable density with a lot of good focus at the ground public level. And yet what I find exciting in some of the views up Huntington Avenue and the Avenue of the Arts is the potential for some new landmark or gateway buildings in places that right now are underutilized and underwhelming. And I think that's really the challenge in the forthcoming developments. But I think there's so much potential there. And I do want to applaud the planners in the commitment to also rehabilitating many of the signature buildings that are on site. That was discussed in some of the overall presentations, not so much the emphasis around new development or new plans, but that will continue on. And overall, just the connectivity that's being enhanced across the multiple directions of the campus, to me is something I find exciting, and I think is a great opportunity, not just to support new development, but also to continue to weave Northeastern into the surrounding multiple neighborhoods and across public transportation and such. So I think there's so much here that will be a great enhancement. And of course, the proof will be in each of the designs and the details. But I think this is a very exciting prospect for us.
Thank you, Kathy. And I see Laura's hand up, and then Christina, I think following Laura's comments, we'll move into public testimony. Laura?
Just take one more minute. I would like to reinforce what Shauna said about making sure that there's a sense of connectivity between all of the spaces. And I think that's the ambition of the proponent for sure. But at the same time, I want to make sure that each of these spaces has, because landscape can be such a powerful unifier, I also want to make sure that the proponents do consider that each of these landscapes can also have their own character, just as the buildings have now, sort of tossed and turned. I mean, this is the signature of a modern urban campus, right? It's eccentric. And I think that's something that's really powerful about it. So I would encourage you to just keep up that goal as you're moving along and building things space to space. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Christina, do we have any public comment?
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so I'm going to close the public testimony period.
Thank you, Christina. We've had a quiet night. I wonder if the proponent will put up slide 5. I just wanted to add a few comments as we move into our recommendations. Slide 5. When we began as a full commission, I think Victoria was saying it was about 6 months ago. I think one of the primary themes was about making it less complex to kind of walk through the campus and understand where you were. And I think, as Shauna said and Laura said, I think that that is the ambition here. And I think as you look at these diagrams, I think they do feel still quite complex, but I think that they don't fully reflect some of the changes, the meaningful changes that you all have made in thinking about how you navigate this campus. And, you know, whether the library becomes that hard or the Curry Center becomes that hard, I would really encourage you to think about landscape as a way to bring this campus together and to make it more legible as it fits into the urban form. But great project, and again, thank you for being so responsive to our sessions with you.
Linda, could I piggyback one comment onto what you just said?
Sure.
I think, and I agree with you, it is a complex problem, hard to present. From the architecture vantage point, one of the things that I have really felt as we went through this process is that the Forsyth building, which we spent, you know, quite a bit of time talking about, you know, occupies a unique site relative to the very substantial forest of buildings, shall we say, that exists on the other side of Huntington Avenue. And I just think that while every building, of course, will be beautiful and should be beautiful, I think that as this plan goes forward and thinking about how the planning staff thinks about that building specifically, it does stand apart, and it does stand apart relative to the MFA and other buildings on that side. And there is, in my mind, additional pressure, and it is a dorm building. And so that sort of conventional use notwithstanding, I think it's important to think very hard about what that building looks like and how it sits relative to the rest of the city and relative to all of the new work that will be happening on the other side of Huntington Avenue. So I just think that and that to me is about almost the clarity of the diagram, right? One of the things about the diagram is there are two sides of Huntington Avenue. They have very different characters. You have done a very good job of trying to unify them with this idea of base and on the Huntington Avenue of the Arts guidelines, but that building stands apart. So please pay special attention to it.
Thank you, David. And commissioners, we can entertain a motion. I think there were 3 subpoints that commissioners brought up today that I think would be meaningful in this motion. The first is about making sure that there are guidelines around porosity and transparency. The second is about really clarifying the wayfinding. And the third is about thinking about the Avenue of the Arts and understanding the character of both sides. So I'll throw those out there. I can't make a motion, but I look forward to hearing yours, including those 3 subpoints.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion with those 3 subpoints.
Thanks, David.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye. Shauna Gilly-Smith.
Aye.
David Hassin.
Aye.
Kathy Kotaritis.
Aye.
Catherine Morris.
Aye.
Bill Ron.
Aye.
Laura Solano. I think you said aye, Laura, is that right?
Yes, aye.
Okay, perfect. And myself, Linda Eastley, aye. You are approved. Thank you so much.
I don't think you got my vote. But
Oh,
that's
sorry, Kirk. Sorry. I had you as recused, but
Aye.
you're
Okay.
right. All right.
No,
Great.
thanks.
All right. We're unanimous in our approval. So thank you to the Northeastern team.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, now we're going to move on to building number 8 of the master plan, which is Matthews Arena. And as that PowerPoint presentation is being brought up, the cohort that reviewed this project actually finished reviewing it in February, so it's been a little while, but we wanted to present both of these projects together, and we just finished reviewing the IMP in April, and so that's why there's been a pause. And so I'll give you a quick reminder of who was involved in that review, and we'll take your comments first after the proponent's presentation. So that's Kathy Kotaritis, Catherine Morris, Laura Solano, David Hassin, and Bill Ron. So I think we are ready for Matthews Arena.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
We can. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, let me get a little bit organized. Okay. Good evening. I'm Brian Schabel, Design Director at Perkins & Will, and I'm happy to be here tonight and show you the progress that we made. I really want to actually take time to reflect that I think we made a lot of progress based on the discussions we've had with this group, and I appreciate that, and we all appreciate that. We've had 4 touch points, 1 with the full commission and 3 with the subcommittee, and basically the resultant progress has been activating the facade with fenestration, both in the amount and the detailing, introducing warmer tones in the detailing, opening up the northeast corner. We've had a lot of discussions about that as it relates to Mass Ave, and enlivening the public realm. So hopefully you'll agree that we've made a lot of progress through this process. This project is at the east end of campus, as you obviously know from the previous discussion. I want to point out that it's slightly removed from both Mass Ave and Huntington, and to me, that's an important distinction for how it actually engages. It's not not an extremely active streets adjacent to it. Northeastern's architecture has started with the light gray brick and has evolved, but it's always remained diverse and often purposefully unique to its context, and we think that's important as well. This immediate context is also diverse in its architecture and its materiality. The conservatory buildings, the light high-rise at the corner, soon to be completed Carter School, and the more typical brick residential buildings at the corner are an example, and the terracotta of the conservatory building at St Botolph and Gainsborough. They're all, there's a diversity there that we built upon. Some quick massing diagrams to explain how we proceeded through the project. So the program is unique in that it's an arena as well as several long-spanned rec areas. Didn't fit on the site. Normally, these would be obviously a single-story building because of the long spans in particular, but to fit in the urban condition, we have stacked that, which is, again, very unique to this project. We've added relief to that, carving out at the public realm at the grade and also at the upper floor to really relate to the datums established within the city. And then finally, we shape the building to sort of soften the space, and I'll get into that a little bit, as well as add intrigue and show the movement really of the happenings within. This is the resultants section, which is sort of an amalgamation of these really interesting long span spaces: basketball team space, multi-purpose turf, rec courts, and arena, all stacked in a unique way. For this project, we think this is a standout opportunity for the university and for the city, actually. Here's the study model with the IMP massing ghosted in. The model demonstrates the shift in the mass and the breakdown in the scale relating to the contextual datums of the south end. The main lobby is at the west end. You can see my mouse, which really faces campus and is also in anticipation of the planned improvements to the T-stop by Gainsborough, as well as the pedestrian flows proposed by the IMP you saw earlier. We have a series of images we'll show you, some with befores and after. So the image on the left is almost a year ago, the first image that we showed you. And through the conversations, you can see that we've added warmth, texture, and detailing that we'll get into in a second. This is the view looking towards Mass Ave from the corner. It's the main entry. The facade is an iron spot brick. We feel the sheen of the brick really plays with the light throughout the day and accentuates the sculptural aspects of the building, like the round corners. We've added different patterns of texture throughout the brick facade to animate it. I want to say that to me, Boston is actually a heavy city, but it's also one with a softness to it, and as is evident in the row windows, the bow windows of the row houses. Relating to this, we have softened the corners, as I mentioned, but also designed some unique window articulations, which you'll see that add to the softness. In contrast to the brick, we've added a lot more warmth and brighter reflective elements throughout the design, lining the cuts in the facade with aluminum plate, adding fins in certain locations to add texture and or provide solar shading. And you'll see that we've worked on the soffits of these spaces at the ground level as well that are at interest. At night, the building pops with the activity within. We really wanted to highlight that. And we were also, it was discussed in some of these meetings about how it looks throughout the year. So the brick will change throughout the day and throughout the year, the color of it, and it will react. And that's something we think really interesting, is really interesting about it, particularly with the shape. And over the holidays, I visited buildings of the same brick in a variety of light conditions and remain confident that this is appropriate and an exciting solution. This is a view of the southwest corner. On the left, you can see where we were when we began, and on the right, the development, in no small part due to the comments we received from you. This is a more animated facade. We've added a base to it, some additional glazing, and I want to point out here that it's important to state that we have a high sustainable goal. We're targeting LB's Living Building Challenge core. So we've been very diligent about the location and amount of glazing, calculating the daylight and mediating the heat gain and glare within the building. So it's been important to us to use it sparingly but effectively throughout the composition. Here's a south facade is different than the other ones along the streets, and it's not really experienced from an adjacent pedestrian position as much, but from afar and from the train platforms at Carter Fields. And this is a view from Carter Fields, looking at it from afar and a little bit closer, which will be common. And here you can see we've added glazing, and in particular, we've expressed the southwest stair, which we hope will be the dominant vertical circulation for the rec users, sort of enhancing that experience as well as showing the activity within the building. The northeast corner, you can see we've opened it up through our discussions and added interest, and we'll get into that. We've spent a lot of time on this, and the entry has improved a lot, again, based on the comments we've received and moving forward. We've opened it up, and you can we see this as the beginning of the wrapper of this curving facade that envelops the whole amalgamation of spaces, the unique composition of the spaces. Within that, we have celebrated the arch from the existing Matthews in more or less the same location, working on the feedback from the Landmarks Commission. We've softened the pedestrian area with landscape and seating bench, which also adds to the intuitive wayfinding. We saw this glass box. There were comments about where the entry is. We wanted to push people through around the corner, which will explain of this glass mass here. And this helps people understand that you're still moving through the site. This is not a primary entry, and we felt it awkward to make it so prominent at the base. So we've added an amenity to the site that we feel is helpful here. Here you can also see the historic arch prominently integrated within this entry point. During events, we anticipate this being the entry and pathway to the doghouse or the student section. So this enriches the ceremony of that procession, which is important to us for the students. We've also spent a lot of time on St. Botolph. The black wall that we've added a lot of interest to the black wall that does a few things for us. It's the primary brand color, but it also accentuates the depth of the mass and it pops the content we are proposing. On the left, you see the sepia tone mosaics we're proposing, really showing off and explaining the historic Matthews Arena of the architecture, telling the story of the building, and lightening the overall experience of this area. With vitrines within it, or maybe plaques of images and small amounts of text that narrate the significant events that have occurred on site. So we're trying to tell the story of the building and the events within this one large mural, if you will, that adds interest and is associated with the queuing of that entry I explained before, the Northeast.
2 minutes, Brian.
Thank you. This is a placeholder for a 3D element that may be brand and or sculpture. We're working on that as well, but it really delineates the two entry points, which I'll explain in a second. And it's also a good image to show how we've added some detail and brightness and warmth around the windows throughout the building. The landscape plan and how it works on the site. The hardscape actually echoes the forms of the building and the vibrancy within, and breaks down the scale, as you'll see in the renderings coming up. The lines in the hardscape, as well as the 3D elements that you'll see, and the sculpture help break down and designate the queuing zones and the flow to the main entries of the project. We have added a lot of warmth and interest to the St. Botolph experience compared to where we began with you. And we'll go through a series of images. This is looking west on St. Botolph. The main concourse above is fully glazed on this north facade. So we see a lot of activity during events and a great interaction with the city. The fins have been added to add warmth and rhythm to the glazing. And we're developing the graphics to tell the story, as I mentioned before. This is looking the opposite direction. We're proposing that wall to be a glazed tile to give it the wall scale and interest similar to the texture in the brick. And then again, you can see the 3D placeholder designate. This is the auxiliary entry here on the right. And then a view at night. We see this as an opportunity to keep the light in this zone, so not sending a lot of light outward, but really highlighting this interesting history and making that an inviting and warm experience. This is the last slide. That's the view of the main entry at the corner. And here you can see the three-dimensional benches that are built into those stripes. And they add place for respite as well as organize the queuing, as you saw in the diagram before. There's been a lot of warmth added here. You can see a reflective material in the soffit. We're looking at a metal plate or perhaps a reflective tile, a metallic tile that allows you to interact in an abstract way with the ceiling. And as well as we've added fins at the top to create, again, more rhythm and scale and warmth, but maintained more transparent when looked at obliquely at the lower eye level. So I think we've made a lot of progress, and I want to thank you for your comments and for pushing us in some areas in the subcommittee and the meetings. The northeast corner is a lot more welcoming. The added warmth of the champagne colored metal and the texture of the pedestrian experience, for instance, have all improved based on your comments, and I want to thank you for that. And in general, we're excited about how the building is richly interacting with the city at different scales, from afar, from the approach, and from an adjacent experience. So thank you.
Brian, thanks for a great presentation. And also thank you for including that slide number 6, which gives us some of the massing that is proposed in the IMP. I think that was really
the model. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was really helpful to see how this building would interact with proposed buildings on the campus. All right, so there's 5 of you in the cohort that have reviewed this, and I see David's hand up. So start us off, David.
Brian, thank you. I think I am the things that I was really most concerned about, which was the approach from Mass Ave. Boy, that is, I find that to be so much improved. Such a much more welcoming approach to the building from public transportation and from Mass Ave. It's actually, in some ways, my favorite part of the building. It's very dynamic in the way that the pieces interlock, and it really reduces, in some ways, the heaviness of the building to me by seeing some of those pieces come apart and be articulated, and then to have this moment of reveal of that historic element is also, which I imagine will be illuminated and stuff like that, also just in my mind ties it back to the historic district that it's immediately adjacent to in a really sensitive way. So I find that really successful, and I'm really happy that you made those changes. I also very much appreciate the effort to introduce these warm tones. And for me, even the difference between cool gray and warm gray on the brick is enormous relative to how it will play with light and the buildings that are around it. And so I'm glad that you took the comments conceptually, not literally, and made those adjustments, because I think that also with the bronze detailing, now I can imagine it in the winter when it's snowing and people are in there and it's feeling warm and inviting. I also very much like the lighting underneath the overhang. It feels a little bit like, the MGM Hall or some of those other places where there's a sense of excitement and crowds gathering around events, more like an event space. And I think that theatricality feels to me appropriate near the Huntington Theater and other marquee elements that exist in that arts district. I think that's really good too. And lastly, the changes facing the corridor, that also feels like I understand the interlocking volumes and the character of the building in a way that feels much more dynamic. So rather than dwelling on any nitpicky things that I might feel, I just want to say that I really appreciate that you've made these changes, and I think it's going to be a really great addition to this part of town.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks for the comments and pushing us.
Thank you, David. Kathy? I think she might have had to step away. Laura, do you want to go next, and then we'll circle back to Kathy?
Sure. Wow. This is just a leap. And it was pretty good before. So thank you very much for that. And, one of the things that I've kind of been persistent about is this facade of the building and the landscape in particular in this. And I think that you've just given it such an upgrade by adding the bronzing and reconsidering what that piece of sculpture might be, which I'll say in a second, talk more about in a second. But I think that adding the seating that you have, which will also help with organizing queuing. If we could go to, I think there's a view down St Botolph's that shows that a little bit better, maybe from the other side. Yeah, there you go. I think this kind of quiet benches kind of add a layer of elegance here. And I would just encourage you to add more so that it feels more like a social space. But be very careful about that. The other is the benches along this area. There's a repeat of the back bench that's out front. I don't think that's necessary. I think it would be great to just keep the front a very special place and let this have its own elegance. I don't think you need to wrap that furniture.
Need these?
Yeah.
Yep.
I just don't think it's necessary. It's now just a very strong presence that, it's elegant and it can, hopefully stay that way. The only thing that, actually there are two things. One is, the caution sign comes up for me when I look at this, and I know it's a placeholder for the sculpture or something that's going to, occupy that space. And, I would encourage you and your client to think about whether or not that can either be something ephemeral that shows up at night, which would be really interesting, I think, or something that becomes of the landscape so that it feels integrated into the building. This building is so interconnected, and the landscape feels very interconnected. And I worry about just kind of putting something there.
Yep.
And I know it's early on and you're working on that. And then if we could go to the end elevation from Mass Ave, which I too think you've just done a terrific job of it.
I think where it is in the, it's back here.
I think it's a little bit later.
There it is. Yep.
There it is. Yeah. I think that this is just such a terrific solution. But one thing I'll caution you about is I know to the left down that alley, you go down and into the bike room. And that still bothers me because it feels like it's so out of the way and maybe even dangerous.
That's the staff bike room. It's only for the staff of the building. We meant to clarify that actually earlier, because I remember you said that last time. I just wanted to clarify it's not really a public bike room.
Right, but still be careful.
Yep.
It's
appreciate that.
Not staff want to feel safe too.
Yep. Appreciate that. I agree.
So, but otherwise, I'm just really thrilled to see this. You just worked so hard and added very little to make a lot.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Laura. Kathy, we're coming back to you.
Yes, I'm so sorry about that. So thank you for the presentation. The befores and afters actually really were so distinctly different that it really underscored the important improvements and changes that you've made, that both in response to what we asked for, but toward a better project as it integrates into the neighborhood. In fact, this slide, I think, shows that juxtaposition, that that warming up the brick and accenting with warmer metals and more textures has really brought forward. But I definitely want to commend you for maintaining and figuring out such a clever way to present the arch of the former entrance to Matthews Arena. I think it's it has it calls out curiosity, makes at least if I were walking down this street, I'd want to know more. And on that note, I also appreciate the emphasis on interpretation on this this street and this side of the building, because in many respects, everything you're showing is a significant transition from the historic Matthews Arena and older building. But it's not just a transition in the building; it really is a way of elevating some important public memory. And I think you've handled that really cleverly here so that there's an anchor, but you're also, I think with this building, underscoring what's coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And Sean, I see your hand up. I just wanted to see if either Bill or Catherine had wanted to chime in as part of that review cohort.
I do.
All right, Catherine, you're on.
I can't stop smiling because this particular view I had probably the most trouble with initially, and not only is it clean, but it allows for transparency. Whether you are a student, a resident, or someone visiting, there's transparency, and I can't think of any other way you could have did it. So I know we were beautifully harsh, but you did it. So I just want to thank you for that, and definitely on the ground playing floor with the colors and the history. Again, that's also a part of transparency, which community deserves. So just thank you for incorporating that feedback into this iteration of this design.
And thanks for the feedback. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Bill, did you want to make any comments? All right, Shauna.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And actually, this view is really beautiful. I think the complexity, but also the contrast in texture and the surprise. Um, I hadn't followed this project, and I actually was pretty concerned until we had the streetscape level walk around, and the richness at the level of the pedestrian experience is pretty great. Can we move over to the other side with the tiles? And this is the with the tiled panel. Maybe maybe one of the views, same area, but a view, the
Yeah.
sort of diagonal. Yeah.
I think it's one of like this
Yeah,
one.
this one. Either of these is fine.
Yep.
So for me, it's the golden, the gold is kind of the golden solution to bring the warmth and richness and surprise and texture. I think the tiled panel can also be really beautiful. So I have a very small suggestion to think about. Typically when we do wood benches in public situations, we let them go gray. And I think one of the things about this project that the wood color is tying in with the gold or the bronze of your of the building. And I think that level of richness, whether it's staining the wood, using a different material, using a slightly different bench, I think is important, because I think particularly in the winter months, if everything is really gray at the ground level and you don't have the beauty of the light as we're seeing now, you'll lose a lot. So I think just thinking about that, as well as the specific paving materials as you're going forward, to get more to have some level of that warmth within the ground plane, as well as the facade itself.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. I'm glad we're on this view. I only had one comment that hasn't already been said, and I wanted to piggyback on David Hassein's comment, because that's what I jotted down in my notes, that I love that this feels like it could be a theater, and that you are in a theater district. And I would really encourage you, in addition to the kind of champagne color that you have and the brick that you have, to think kind of playfully about lighting. And you're starting to suggest that there might be some of that, especially on the ground plane, especially on that bespoke kind of black wall that we're looking at here, and have a little fun with it. Because this is a building that is about kind of teamwork and fun, and it would be wonderful to see that expressed, particularly on this stretch of wall that will not have any glazing in it.
Great.
I don't see any other commissioner hands, and we did lose Bill. Unfortunately, he had to sign off before he was able to make any comments. So Christina, I think we're ready for any public comments and testimony.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so we will close the public testimony period.
Thank you, Christina.
So does that mean I can make a motion?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye. Shauna? Gilly-Smith? David Hassein?
Aye.
Kathy Kotaritas?
Aye.
Catherine Morris?
Aye.
We've lost Bill Ron. Laura Solano?
Aye.
And Kirk Sykes?
Aye.
And myself, aye. You are approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
No.
All right, we will transition to the last project of the night, and I think Mimi will be coming back in. Christina, I did want to just do a quick check on quorum.
We are tight to quorum right now. We are at 7.
All
So
right, that's
when
what I
Mimi
counted
joins,
too.
we'll have 8.
Great.
So if we don't lose anyone else, I think we're good to review in the regular order. But if anyone plans to drop at this time, we should do some things a little out of sequence.
Is everyone able to stay through this project to the vote? I'm seeing
Yeah,
lots of
is that all?
head
Is that all we
nodding.
have left?
Yes.
Is this
Just have,
presentation?
we just have this one
Yeah,
project
sure.
left. We're hoping to wrap up at 8 o'clock. I think we are on time for that. So, but we
Great.
would do that. We would do the vote in reverse order if we lost anybody. All right, I'm gonna hand this back to you, Mimi.
Thank you, Linda. I don't need to introduce too much here, so maybe with that, I think we can have the presentation and have all commissioners stay on to give their feedback and give a motion to move the project forward. So I'll hand it over to the planning staff, either Ted or Seth will walk us through any zoning and planning issues first.
Christina, did you have any other introduction or wanted me to dive into this?
No, go ahead and get started.
Great. So thank you, commissioners. Tonight you will be, excuse me, seeing Longwood Place Phase 1, which is one of 2 anticipated phases of the Longwood Place PDA, which this commission reviewed and approved back in 2022. It was a 5-building master plan, and phase 1 is proposed to be 3 buildings, including 1 residential building, R1, 2 commercial buildings, C1 and C2, and associated public realm elements. The approved PDA master plan has set the regulatory context for the site, and the proponents will speak, Ted will speak a little bit about the framework for the master plan, and the proponents will follow up. And just a reminder that this did go through an initial and final meeting, as well as 6 design subcommittees during the master plan process. Ted.
Thanks, Seth, and nice to see you, commissioners. Good evening. Next slide, please. So as Seth noted, the planning and zoning context are already set by the PDA, which this body has previously reviewed. I wanted to highlight on the left side that the key dimensional regulations in the PDA zoning overlay include maximum height, maximum GFA, maximum floor plate area, minimum open space, and then also, as noted on the diagram, it also indicates minimum setbacks between buildings in certain locations and minimum setbacks of buildings from the property edges. And I just want to note that the diagram on this slide is conceptual, and what is called the central connector, which is between the buildings labeled 1 and 3 on this diagram, you'll see that there's 2 dimensions listed, but the way the zoning is written, for example, on that particular dimension, that as long as there is a minimum setback between buildings of 40 feet maintained, that the exact proportions and dimensions of that have some flexibility. So I want you all to be aware of those elements where there is some flexibility, and I'm happy to answer any questions about where there is flexibility. And then also, as noted on the bottom right, there's 2 other layers to the planning context in addition to this PDA overlay. Right now, our transportation planners in the planning department are working on a plan, the Fenway Transportation Action Plan, and Seth and I are happy to answer any questions that are related to that. And this is also subject to Parks Commission review. Next slide, please. So on the last slide, we talked about the quantitative characteristics of the zoning, and this gets into a little bit more of the qualitative differentiation of those open spaces. Seth will talk about the architecture later after the proponents present, but we wanted to highlight for you that there's 3 different kinds of open space that are actually codified into the zoning overlay. So these are POPs, the publicly accessible private open spaces, and these are differentiated also from public realm spaces and private amenity spaces. And the proponent will explain that in more detail. And again, I'll be happy to talk about how that relates to the zoning. So with that, thank you. And I think the proponent will go next.
Okay, thank you. Just here. Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Emily Paparella with Elkis Manfredi Architects, and to respect our time this evening, we'll share a rather condensed introduction to the project. The project proponent, Skanska, has assembled a team of 5 designers who you see here on the screen, and tonight I'm joined by Philip Dugdale of Sasaki, Tony Marchese from Picard Chilton Architects, and Anna Lashensky from KPF. This team has been collaborating together and with the planning department staff over the last year and a half, and we look forward to beginning the review process with you, soliciting as much feedback as possible, and returning in subcommittee with more detail on each of these components. The Longwood Place project is a partnership with Simmons University in the form of a long-term ground lease, and the schedule on the top of the page shows Longwood Place starting with the commencement of the Article 80C process in 2020. And as a summary, the PDA project came before this commission between February and September of 2022, which Seth just pointed out. And on the bottom of this timeline, you'll see that the Simmons University Living and Learning project is currently under construction. It will complete in January of 2027, and that would be the earliest that the construction of Longwood Place would commence. As an overview, the approved PDA includes 2.6 acres of open space, 3 commercial buildings, 2 residential buildings with parking and loading entirely below grade. And what we'll show you tonight is fully compliant with all of the dimensional requirements set forth in the PDA. The proposed Article 80B project, Longwood Place Phase 1, includes the first 2 commercial buildings, the first residential building. It delivers 1.9 acres of open space and the below grade parking and loading. I'll just show these kind of side by side for comparison. This conceptual rendering was included in the PDA, and this evening we'll introduce how we've started to develop and refine the public realm and the buildings in alignment with the PDA goals. Our design thesis comprises 4 themes. 1, creating a network of open spaces. 2, thinking about how buildings meet the ground in terms of massing, uses, and architectural expression. 3, view corridors, how the buildings respond to each other's massing and allow visual penetration through the site. And 4, carefully designing buildings so that they respond to their context and to each other and are legible in their uses. Early on, Skanska established a design process in which the designers met at regular intervals. Our goal was to create different and distinct buildings, but with common elements that make them part of a whole. And the development of the design follows the PDA design guidelines, which were presented to this commission in September of 22 and are organized into 3 parts. 1, building and massing, their relationship to each other and to the open space. 2, public realm, ground floor connections, and the commitment to public space. And 3, landscape in the sense of a diversity of spaces. Outside of the Emerald Necklace, there is a lack of public open space in the LMA. We know that the world's leading medical and research institutions that are located here require large sort of congealed footprints. So this figure ground drawing compares the footprints of the proposed project in pink with the larger institutional footprints of the LMA.
Sasaki was the master planner of the site during the PDA and is currently leading the design of the open space. As Emily mentioned, the PDA outlined a diversity of open spaces, including the main heart, with a minimum of 31,000 square feet, the 3,000 square feet Riverway Gateway, and the 6,000 square feet Pocket Plaza. Through active building edges and their adjacent open spaces, the architecture and landscape work together to welcome pedestrians into the site. Our design approach is centered around creating playful, unexpected experiences within landscaped rooms. with smaller intimate spaces within the larger zones to accommodate a diverse range of users. The goal of the main heart is to create a welcoming open space for all. Interactive features like the water steps bring life to this space and create special gateway moments such as this along Brookline Ave. We also provide quieter spaces away from active edges to create moments of respite and pause. The design is for all ages, residents, healthcare workers, visitors, and even patients. Some of those playful spaces include a designated play area, a hammock grove with shade trees, seasonal fire pits, and the front porch that overlooks the main heart. The central connector is lined with activity and retail. Here you can see the entrance to the Vicolo on the left-hand side that draws pedestrians off Brookline into the site itself. And as you move through the connector towards the main heart, the landscape really opens up. Here at the node of all three buildings, you can read the datum that the three buildings create by lifting their active bases above the ground plane.
The colorful areas in this plan highlight all of the active uses that help animate and support the surrounding open spaces. And I'll just quickly orient you to the three buildings starting at the bottom of the page at Brookline Ave. Commercial building C1 is expressed here as 2 volumes split by the Vicolo pedestrian passage. Its entry is located plan east on Mid-Block Road. And to the north is commercial building C2 with entries on the connector and retail facing the heart. Because the project is designed to function holistically and prioritize active edges, we have a single loading dock entry, which is accommodated in C2 building. This serves all buildings on the site via below-grade connections. And finally, the residential building with a compact footprint just over 10,000 square feet. It faces the heart to the south, and its entry is on the north along the more residential scaled Pilgrim Road. All of the building plans are shaped to optimize for their functions, for housing, obviously, and also viable floor plates for research.
The C1 building is being designed by Picard Chilton Architects. The building is 15 stories tall and about 503,000 square feet. The total square footage is about 9% lower than the PDA, and the average floor plates are about 13% smaller than those dictated in the PDA. The building holds the primary frontage on Brookline Ave, while also facing the heart. Its form is shaped through a series of faceted cuts designed to bring light and air into the site, soften the massing, and create a dynamic presence on Brookline. Standing on Brookline at the intersection of the Mid-Block Street shows the entrance to the C1 building. The carved gesture midway along Brookline marks the Vicolo and suggests a sense of discovery beyond. You'll also see that the two-story expression of the base of the building is transparent, the storefront is operable, and recessed within the street front. Additionally, the Y columns create a lifted open feel within the pedestrian realm.
2 minutes remaining.
Commercial building C2 is being designed by KPF. The building is 13 stories and approximately 335,000 square feet. A series of setbacks at the short end of the building results in a massing that subtly leans away from its adjacent context, creating a softer building edge and providing for generous outdoor spaces for tenants, all while preserving the efficiency and viability of the interior floor plates. From the riverway, the building presents itself as 3 distinct shifting volumes, each stepping forward incrementally towards the south. The stepped composition gives C2 its unique character. The facade materials draw inspiration from the neighboring buildings along Pilgrim Street and the red and buff brick palette of R1. The different colors are arranged in a subtle gradient that brings animation and rhythm to the building's exterior.
And residential building R1 is designed by Elkis Manfredi. It's approximately 205 feet tall and will include approximately 227 residential units. The building is composed of 2 parts, one facing Brookline Avenue in the main heart, which you see here, and the second facing Pilgrim Road. The building is shaped to create an invitation into the site. And from Pilgrim Road, the elevation creates a more regular street wall and incorporates red brick, drawing from the material context of the LMA. Finally, a summary of the design principles. 1, that we create a network of open space, a place for everyone, and a respite within the LMA. 2, that buildings meet the ground with active uses to support those open spaces. 3, that building massing responds to each other to create an invitation into the site. And finally, that we create architecture that is diverse but relates to its context and is legible in its uses. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing your feedback. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, team. Commissioners.
Sorry, Mimi, couple slides to
right.
update the commission on some of the key items that the staff has been working with the proponent team on. So as we look at the design of these open spaces, we want to make sure that we're clear on what the big idea of each of the open spaces, the open space network is, and how it ties into larger open space networks within the LMA. We want to ensure that the thermal comfort, particularly wind and shadow, is incorporated into the programming and design of all of the open spaces, especially within those spaces that are, in part covered by building above and in between building C1 and C2 in what is known as the connector. At number 3, we want to make sure that we study how to celebrate the Vicolo, which is an introduction, I believe, into the scheme developed during the Phase 1 project, not originally envisioned in the master plan or not enshrined in the master plan, and how is that celebrated and made clear and help to animate the Brookline Ave frontage. And we are working with a proponent to study the orientation of the semi-public forum that's at the base of building C1 to provide a successful activation of the public realm. Next, please. The results of the wind and thermal comfort studies will help inform the appropriate programming of the connector itself, and if building articulation changes and/or type of covering might be appropriate to help mitigate these impacts for comfort. And we also really want to dive deeper into the relationship between building C1 and C2 faces at the base, middle, and top, and how does that inform the programming and inhabitation of the connector itself. Next, please. And how can each building, particularly C2, be best massed and articulated to break down the building scale from all immediately surrounding open spaces as well as from the fens? And with that, I thank you and thank the proponent for working in a lot of information in a exactly 10-minute long presentation.
Excellent. Thanks, Seth. I will turn it over to the commissioners, and I see David has seen you have your hand up. Oh, proponent team, we need some image up. Maybe we can at least start with a site plan, but David, if you have any special drawings you want them to pull up, by all means.
I think any overall perspective would be.
Who was the cohort? Excuse me, David. Who is the cohort that has seen this project before? No one.
This is a brand new project.
Okay.
It's being introduced. The only thing that we have done in the past is review the PDA for the site, but the buildings are coming back, and it's new for everyone on the commission.
Thank you.
So thanks, Mimi. I think that I would like to, we're talking about what we would like to discuss in subcommittee. And so I would like to have a conversation about architectural character in this district. We are building a new district, and Boston is a city of districts. And in general, historically, at least, those districts have had a distinct character. One of the criticisms that has arisen over, let's say, at the Seaport or in Kendall Square at our sister city in Cambridge, is this notion that that architecture is being developed to be interesting, but more of a sculpture park approach to a new district in which each building has a very strong and individual character, and that is in fact ultimately the character of this new district. And when I hear the proponents talk about the context and the relationship, the strong relationship that these buildings have with each other, I would challenge them to say that I don't think that the general public would read this grouping of buildings as a group of buildings that has a strong relationship one to the other in terms of character, form, material, etc. Now, I'm not sure that that's a requisite of this project at all, but I would like to have a conversation about it. And Seth, I think that would be something that, that I would like to get the city's take on as well. These are the first three buildings, presumably new buildings further down the block would similarly approach their form and scale and massing in a similar way. And therefore we would be creating a cluster of buildings that have very unique and distinctive characters, one to the other, rather than, in my mind, creating some sort of a collective identity about a new district that is emerging in this rather substantial piece of the city's landscape. I think that it would be helpful for us to see, in much the same way the Northeastern team did, these elevations down Huntington Avenue that looked at the scale and character of buildings along an extended boulevard. I think it would be interesting for us to take a look at this in the context of the LMA and the Fenway district that we see in the distance here in the photograph, to understand what it is like for someone to travel down Boylston Street, down a street which had actually, I think by nature of the development guidelines, a pretty strong street wall, pretty strong character, hitting the fens and then crossing over into this district. What is that going to feel like? And so I would like to get to sort of pull out a little bit and understand the character of, let's say, the new building that we're looking at right now. By the way, individually, I think many of the elements on all these buildings are very beautiful. I think that the porous character of the base of the buildings is a really strong unifying idea that I think could be a very exciting and successful characteristic of the district. But I am thinking in my comments about how the buildings are expressed sort of above that zone relative to one another and relative to the city beyond. And maybe that can be explored in elevation, in model. We just looked at the new Dana-Farber building, which is just down the street, which is, again, a very distinctive building. I'd like to see this complex in that larger context and really actually hear from the three different architects how, when they talk about the buildings being contextual and relating to each other, what that exactly means to them so that I can see that through their eyes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Shauna, and maybe I should just mention, we're about to lose one commissioner and we really need to hold on to everyone's vote, present and recused. So maybe after Shauna, just as a heads up, after you give your comments, I think I'm going to interrupt and have the group vote. And then we can go back and resume to comments.
Yeah, we could do that now too, if you wanted, Mimi.
David needs another few minutes. So I think maybe Mimi, if we could stick to the plan of maybe doing this in like 7 or 8 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, Linda, if you could monitor that.
I will. Happy
interrupt
to.
us. I think that would be great. Happy to monitor text and all kinds of information coming at us.
I'm on it. All right.
So I think following on David's comments, I think it is and also Seth's comment. So David's comment about the interbuilding diversity and what is the appropriate balance and the language, and then Seth's comment about what is the overall landscape idea. And I don't know if we need to have an overall big landscape idea, but it does feel like everything is diverse, that the landscape has a number of different components to it. The architecture has a number of different components to it, which may or may not be the right direction, but I think I would like to understand that more. A couple things I'd like to understand, and you can see it better actually in this view, it's the overall grading strategy and level separation. And when we do come back to starting to look at the landscape, I would like to see a plan that doesn't have these really strong oranges and yellows, because I think it's really hard. It's somewhat deceptive of the spatial understanding of the space if it's completely planar. So I would like it to be represented more as if we're actually, unless that really is the intentional coloration, but so we can understand what the spatial scale of the landscape moves as we move between it, and how it helps to connect or connect these different elements, or what is the spatial sequence going through it. I think when we get towards the end of the evening, one of the conversations will be, how is this project looked at in the following subcommittees? Are we looking at it building by building, which sounds like it's going possibly very different from the direction David was just asking to look at. So it may be that we need sort of a landscape, and I'm sort of jumping to the end at the beginning, but we need a landscape and overall site strategy meeting as one of the first meetings, and then maybe go to the individual buildings.
Yeah, I think that's
but
definitely
there's some very
something.
exciting and beautiful things in it. And I think actually the strongest part for me was actually the spatial sequence walking around at the ground level.
Yeah, thank you, Shauna. And I think that's a really good thing for us to keep thinking of, is how do we break up these meetings. But maybe Emily, if you could go to site plan. I just want to make sure that the orange and yellow tones that you were talking about is a site plan reference, right?
Yeah, that is when we were looking at the site plan, because it's somewhat, within our office, I also find it somewhat deceptive. The colors read spatially, but they're, if you take the color away, what is really left there?
Okay, it's a helpful comment. Just wanted to clarify.
Thanks.
Linda?
Thank you, Mimi. And thanks for the presentation today. I know that there were a lot of images I'm sure you wanted to share, so appreciate you keeping it compact. I am really struggling to understand how this district is hanging together, and the relationships between these three buildings. And I know that C1 has two distinct parts. And so I would love to see an urban design diagram that talked us through in a spatial way, in a three-dimensional way, the ways that these buildings are relating to one another. What datum lines are they trying to pick up? Where are they allowing open space to pass through, or where are they championing open space? And I agree with David's comment earlier that to me they feel like three very independent buildings, building forms, building designs, and I'm really struggling to see the district in it. The second thing that I would love to see at subcommittee is a kind of myopic on the central connector. And I appreciate Seth's comments a few minutes ago. This is a pretty tight space. I think it's 40 feet or opens up to 70 feet. And with the height of these buildings, that is going to feel pretty cavernous. And I just want to understand what that feeling is. And I appreciate you showing it was like 17 or 16, the slide 17 or 16 that helped us to understand that. But I would love to understand what the comfort is in that. Oh, thank you, yes. What the comfort is in that. And because this view is so truncated, you can't really see out from it. I'd like to understand some of the conversations you may have had to help us really understand the space a little bit more, given that it's likely in shadow most of the time and may not be as comfortable a space as maybe other spaces within the district. So love to understand that. And then the third is I would love to understand the edges a little bit more around the district and how you kind of get into this area and out of this area and what those cues are. I think that would be really helpful, in addition to kind of the architectural form and design. So I'd love to have that as kind of a third component.
Thank you, Linda. Maybe I'll just chime in with a couple of comments too. And just because this PDA was pretty recent in 22 that I remember, what the master plan team did in terms of the whole process was really impactful. And I remember them leaving us with a framework of guidelines for the district. And it might be helpful just for the subcommittee team to just remember all of those guidelines. And I remember them being a little bit more specific than this, but perhaps, this is a quick diagram of that. I think what feels really, what's complicated about this project is that you have the heart, but the heart is really not the main space. What has become the main space is that interstitial street-like space between C1 and C2. And I really think that was really not the intention of the whole master plan. It was really more emphasis on the heart. And so how does that space not become just a meaningless open space, and how do we direct energy towards that? At the other end of what's going to be phase 2 now, there was a big indoor winter garden that was a terminus of this street light condition. And so to me, that composition, while it's not going to be realized in all in one phase, it was an important ending to what is now like a street light space. So some consideration of that interim condition might be helpful for us to think about what happens in there. It feels really, really tight at 40 feet, and I know it opens up. And I even wonder if that vicolo, that passageway, is helpful in that. And so just helping us think about that would be a nice thing to talk about in subcommittee. I also feel like the perspective of Longwood Ave feels like a real back to the building, even though there really is no back. And I don't know if that mass wants to be further broken down so it doesn't feel so wall-like. That's just my general, impressions. And then maybe in addition to what has already been asked about a broader thinking of elevations and scale within this new district, I would tack on thinking about or analysis of materiality in the area. Big glassy volumes seem a little bit new to the district, in my opinion. And so I would like you to do a little bit of analysis of what's there in terms of contextual materials. And is there something that we could leverage and bring to this new site instead of making it feel like a brand new direction for the architecture? How do we get both? A deep respect for the context, I think, is what I'm looking for in terms of material. But I see a whole bunch of hands up. I'm going to go to Laura. Oh, Linda, we need to vote.
Mimi, I'm sorry to go out of turn, but if we could pause and do a vote, that would be great.
Okay. And with that, I need a motion.
Move to send to subcommittee.
And I'll second. That.
Great. So with that, I'm going to call on everyone. Laura Solano. Aye. David Hassin.
Aye.
Linda Easley.
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Aye.
Kathy Kotorides.
Aye.
David Manfredi. And Kirk Sykes.
Recused.
And myself, aye. So we will be advancing this project to subcommittee, but we can return to the comments. Thank you all. We just didn't want to miss that. We need to get you in the queue here. Okay, I think I was calling on Linda, but Linda, you were just interrupting for the vote, right? So let me go to Laura Solano, and then I'll do David Haseen next.
I think that there have been some comments so far that really give the teams a chance to go back and study things. But I'll add one thing to the kind of backing up and showing us how what holds the landscape together as well as the buildings together. And that is, I think it's admirable that the buildings have been lifted so that the landscape can extend under them. But I'd like to understand what that relationship is. What I'm having a hard time with between the landscape and the buildings is scale. Having a hard time kind of figuring out what does that 40 feet feel like, or what does it feel like to go underneath the residential building, and where is the entrance to the various buildings. I think that you've sort of done a diagram, but it's been very quick. So I think just backing up to help us understand your thinking would be really helpful and probably advance the conversation further. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. David?
I just wanted to piggyback on your comment, Mimi, which I thought was very helpful, which was if we could go back to that slide that showed the guidelines. I think that maybe some of the reactions that we're having are in relationship to the fact that Mimi pointed out that we did talk about this project fairly recently, so it's relatively fresh in our minds. And I think when I look at either the lower left or the hierarchy of exterior open space slide that's towards the right on the right column, which shows the red heart, if you will, I think that, at least in my understanding, when I was thinking about these guidelines, C1 and C2, for example, these guidelines imply a strong relationship between those two buildings. They are, in a sense, making a street together. And the building that is facing the heart, that stands alone and apart on the left-hand side, was the object, was the special building, the sort of campanile, if you will, in the larger complex. And what we're seeing in the project is actually something very different, where the street is the heart. The residential building that is on the left-hand side is actually the most modest architecturally of the three buildings. And the relationship between C1 and C2, architecturally at least, is very asymmetrical. So in that sense, as I try and interpret these guidelines into your project, that's where I'm struggling, because I had a certain understanding of what this was setting up, and I think, to Mimi's point, that notion that the street would terminate in that new in the building that we have yet to see was very strongly presented as the guidelines, that the three buildings in the center had this strong characteristic relationship to one another, and that the two buildings that were on the outer corners, one at the intersection of that curving road, I can't remember the name of it, and Boylston Street, was one distinct building, and the one that was facing the heart was another. And the resultant project is taking a very, very different attitude, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just saying that it feels contradictory to the guidelines. So I wanted to thank Mimi for bringing those back to the fore, and I do think it would be a good launching off point for us when we look at in my mind, the overall site plan, the overall site strategy, the overall landscape plan, and then the overall architectural plan, and then the buildings individually. And however that is structured from a subcommittee point of view, I would find that helpful.
Yeah, David, I think I think that's exactly what I was trying to say, and I couldn't really articulate it, but I think you're right. It's that C1, C2 really have to work well together. And right now, I don't know that the massing is really supporting that notion. Any other comments? Well, I think we can, Christina, remind me, do we do public testimony for new projects?
We do.
Okay.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised. This was a quiet evening.
It is a quiet evening. It's helping us stay on time.
And before Commissioner Love, before we go back to you all, we meant a roadmap or suggest a roadmap for the different subcommittees for this at the start. So Christina, I don't know if you want to go through that now.
Yes, I think, carrying on from the initial presentation I gave this evening that talked about testing out meeting limits over the course of the summer before formalizing them later this year, the planning department would like to suggest that we do so on this project, especially given the long review that this project went through during the PDA process. And I think the very clear comments that we received from the commission this evening about what to work on next, we'd like to suggest that the potentially that the first subcommittee meeting focus on, as Sean has suggested, on the site plan and related ground floor elements, and that we would run a second subcommittee meeting as a double session, which I think we've had a lot of success with recently, and try to get through the buildings collectively. And that the third session would also be run as a double session where we would have the opportunity to do sort of cleanup on elements from both the public realm and the buildings before potentially returning back to the full commission. This would be 5 total meetings, commensurate with the outline sort of, this is an 80B entitlement, but there's more than 2 buildings in it. And so we want to make sure that we're leaving enough time, but also doing so, conducting our review expeditiously. Does that help?
Yeah, in fact, he did our work for us. I thought we were going to have to come up with a roadmap, and I think that sounds reasonable. My only question is that second meeting when we're doing the 3 buildings, I assume we could just divide the 2 hours, as we wish. It doesn't have to be an hour.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that any other concerns, commissioners, or recommendations?
So Mimi and Christina, the only thing I would add is, this is a really important district, and I think given all of the comments that we shared today, I'm wondering if there will be a pause between today and maybe the first subcommittee, and I might actually go as far as to recommend that, just to give the proponent team and the different architectural components of that team time to work through some of these questions, so that when we see them back in subcommittee to review the open space and ground plane, that we would have given them the benefit of time.
Yes, I'll say that the proponent is, I think, ready to be responsive to the commission's feedback. We very proactively had to request that they actually make no changes in between filing the PNF and the introduction you received this evening in response to the very limited planning department feedback that was shared with you tonight. They were eager to start to address those comments, but we asked that essentially that they hold off on doing so until we heard from the commission tonight, so that the planning department and the BCDC feedback could be synthesized and issued at one point, that they then respond to that and then come back to the commission with updates. Sorry, sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I was going to say my only request is that before we start talking about the individual buildings, that in the same way that we get an overall sense of the landscape strategy and the ground plane strategy, that we get an overall sense of the architectural strategy. and how the buildings, not just these 3 buildings, but the 2 buildings yet to come, are conceived of as a new district, and what they have in common, et cetera, so that when we actually start to look at the buildings individually, I know that I'm in the dark here, that as we start to look at the buildings individually, we have something, some filter through which we can evaluate them, not just how handsome they may be as individual pieces of architecture.
So just
sorry, I was just going to suggest, David, I think that's an excellent point, and I might amend the framing of the first subcommittee to really be about, urban design, landscape and building design principles, so we can have that conversation up front as soon as possible in the sequence of review, and then we get into the individual architecture at the following subcommittee.
That's fine, as long as, I think you know what we're after.
Yeah, and by this time, City Hall is usually in the dark, so tag your.
I need to turn on a light, but I don't want to miss a word.
All right, Shauna, were you going to chime in, or?
I was actually going to chime in to basically say that I thought there should be some sort of temporal separation between the buildings and the principles of the buildings, basically the same thing that Seth just suggested that was following from David's comment. So I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think to wrap it all up, Christina, introducing this new, 3 subcommittee template with the 2 bookends, full commission on either end. We are really assuming that the planning, department is going to hear these comments and work and figure out that time frame to come back to subcommittee as, the issues we're raising are actually realized. It's, if they don't have enough time, it's going to be really hard to stick to this new schedule that we so all want to stick to. So I'll just say that. I think we voted, so
we can say goodnight.
So we can say goodnight. So we can adjourn.
Thank you.
I thought
Thank
you were
you
going
to the proponents, and good night.
But we do. There is an official adjournment that we have to do, and I do need a motion to adjourn.
Oh gosh, I guess that was my motion to adjourn.
Did we do it? Did we do a motion to send a subcommittee?
We did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we got David before.
So before I go
his
completely black, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Great. I'm going to call on everyone. David Haseen.
Aye.
Laura Solano.
Aye.
Linda Easley.
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Yes.
Kathy Koterides.
Yes.
Do we have Kirk Sykes? We still have David Manfredi, at least his name, but we'll see.
Yes, you do. And you have my yes vote.
All right. And myself, Mimi Love. Yes. So I think with that, we are adjourned, and we only went 4 minutes over time, which is really impressive. So Christina, thank you for keeping us in line here. Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
good evening,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.